item 14. And this is the introduction, first reading of an ordinance amending chapter 10.56 of the Petaluma Municipal Code entitled Possession or Discharge regarding safe storage of firearms in residences and requiring lost or stolen firearms to be reported within 48 hours and finding this action is exempt from CEQA pursuant to CEQA guidelines section 15301, existing facilities, 15061B3, common sense, and 15308, protecting environment. And we will have Deputy Police Chief Brian Miller will be leading this off.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, council members. As introduced, I'm Brian Miller. I'm your Deputy Police Chief, and I'm accompanied by Dylan Brady, our Assistant City Attorney, who assisted on the staff report. And I think just to kick off this item, you know, we heard a few times tonight about being a proactive city and being progressive, and this staff report is one of those opportunities that I'm excited to bring forward to you as one of those chances for our city to lead the way again. Unfortunately, I know too well having a loaded or unlocked gun in a home is associated with an increased risk of gun-related injury and death. Even more tragically, children are particularly at risk of injury and death from firearms when firearms are not safely secured in their home. In my almost 20 years of service in this community, I've unfortunately seen a number of those tragic incidents here locally. I've seen children in homes where firearms have been mishandled and they've been injured. I've seen individuals that are prohibited from accessing firearms acquire those in their homes and households from other family members when not properly secured. And we've seen incidents where there's been domestic abuse or individuals in crisis, and there's access, whether intentional or unintentional, that those individuals can acquire and access those firearms in the home. And they've unfortunately led to some challenging incidents for the community and for public safety first responders responding to those incidents. What we do know is that applying trigger locks or using lock boxes when storing firearms in homes reduces that risk of firearm injury and death. The Petaluma Police Department and the city of Petaluma partnered with Project Child Safe, a program from National Shooting Sports Foundation, and they've identified that safe storage of firearms is the #1 way to prevent firearm accidents. Cities throughout California have adopted ordinances requiring the safe storage of firearms in residences. San Francisco recently has had their safe storage law upheld as a constitutional by the 9th Circuit Court of Appeals. And they found that in that incident, San Francisco's lock storage law served a significant government interest by reducing the number of gun-related injuries and deaths from having unlocked handguns in the home. A number of other California municipalities, numbering of at least 20, have also adopted similar safe storage ordinances such as that being presented tonight. Unfortunately, existing state law provides some gaps in the legislation that we're seeking to fill tonight. The current law prohibits keeping firearms within a premise where the person with custody or control of the premises knows or reasonably should know that a child or person prohibited from possessing a firearm is likely to gain access to the firearm, where the child or prohibited person obtains access to a firearm and injures someone or carries the fire off premises. Existing law also requires persons leaving handguns in an unattended vehicle to lock them in a container placed out of plain view, or lock the handguns in a locked container permanently affixed to the vehicle's interior, not in plain view, or lock it in a utility box. However, there's no state law that currently requires safety devices such as lock boxes or trigger locks to be used on firearms stored in residences. It's not uncommon for first responders to enter a home and on an unrelated incident encounter a firearm not secured and accessible somewhere in the home. Keeping a firearm locked when it's not being carried ensures that it cannot be accessed and used by others without the owner's knowledge or permission. In 2008, a report in the Journal of Urban Health noted that more than 500,000 firearms are lost and stolen from private residences each year. Accordingly, safe storage laws can help prevent the theft of firearms left unattended in people's homes. Additionally, this item is also attempting to reduce the time in which individuals that may have had their firearms lost or stolen, shorten the time of reporting from 5 days to 2 days. We note that generally there's a number of good benefits from timely reporting. One, it can protect the actual owner of the firearm. So if their firearm is used unknowingly in an incident, it's reported timely and they can not be included in that investigation, or they can quickly be discounted as for having any involvement. We also know that it can help detect or locate firearms more quickly. It helps us identify individuals that may have access to a firearm that shouldn't and disarm them. And it also creates some opportunities so there cannot be false claims that a firearm was knowingly or unknowingly used by another individual. Ultimately, it also makes owners of firearms be more responsible and accountable for their weapons. Recently, the city of Morgan Hill adopted a similar reporting law, which required the theft or loss of a gun be reported to the police within 48 hours. And that was upheld and found to be preempted by California law. So tonight's ordinance would add regulations requiring all firearms and precursors to firearms to either be stored safely in a locked container or locked with a triggering device. Additionally, the proposed ordinance would require people whose firearms is stolen or lost to report the missing firearm to the Petaluma Police Department within 48 hours of discovering that firearm that's missing. We've noted that in addition, as mentioned earlier in the presentation, the police department has partnered with Project Child Safe. We are providing child safe locks. They're free at no cost, and we've been doing that for a number of years. We do not believe that this would create a substantial burden to persons lawfully carrying and storing firearms in their home, as the devices are readily available, and the requiring of a safe firearm storage is intended to decrease the risk of harm to children and the entire community from unauthorized access to firearms. This proposed ordinance fills an important gap in existing law and aims to reduce accidental gun shootings, gun-related homicides, suicides, and theft of unsecured firearms. If adopted, a violation of the proposed amendments would be subject to enforcement through criminal prosecution as an infraction or a misdemeanor, and civil or administrative enforcement pursuant to the Petaluma Municipal Code. And each of these incidents would be handled distinctly and as a separate offense and uniquely based on the circumstances. We've also done some public outreach. We heard earlier in the year, I believe in public comment in one of these meetings, from Moms Demand Action requesting the city to evaluate such an ordinance. We've looked at other model agencies with heavy assistance from our city attorney's office to identify the one most appropriate for our jurisdiction, which is proposed here tonight. And also through ongoing partnership and relationship with the Petaluma City School District, and specifically Assistant Superintendent Maite Uridi. This Petaluma City Schools has entered a joint resolution between Petaluma City and Petaluma Joint Union High School Districts regarding firearm storage obligations, and they have an intent to update their student handbook on proper procedures for the family household. And should the ordinance as proposed be adopted, we also intend to have city staff work with our local gun dealers to ensure that there's adequate outreach and public education on this. We've also talked internally about having members of the department specialized and trained in firearm safety, conduct public safety videos, not only on proper storage procedures, but also how to properly affix and use a trigger lock or locking device or a storage device. This proposed ordinance also aligns and follows a number of city goals. Goal 4A is a safe community that thrives, maintaining and enhancing public safety and prepare emergencies and disasters through crime and fire prevention and traffic safety. Clearly, this is consistent with what we are working to educate the community on best practices and procedures to increase public safety, not only community-wide, but also in the household. We also feel that reducing access to firearms in the home will hopefully lead to less incidents of injury or death, which would allow public safety staff and EMS staff to be available for other calls for service in case of other emergencies. And we also work plan 78, improve public safety through proactive crime and fire prevention activities. As previously mentioned, we continue to do numerous educational campaigns on ways to reduce risk and prevent crime or injuries to self or community members. We don't anticipate there being any financial impacts of this. Indirect costs may include actually having less police resources devoted to investigating lost or missing firearms, as we're going to get more timely reports or hopefully find that a firearm's been reported on the onset of an incident rather than learning of it and having to work backwards, which is a considerably much more lengthy investigation. And so the alternatives to tonight's proposed ordinance are that council may choose to not adopt the proposed ordinance or to adopt the ordinance with changes at the direction to staff.
Thanks, Brian. And I'll just add to that real quick. This ordinance was modeled off a model ordinance of the Gifford Law Center on gun violence, as well as 21 other jurisdictions, including Morgan Hills, that was most recently upheld by California courts. Like Brian said, the Petaluma Police Department already through the Child Safe Gun Lock program provides these safety devices. So we don't feel it's that big of a burden for gun owners, as well as the penal code requires licensed gun owner or sellers every time they sell or transfer a firearm to also require a locking or storage device that is listed on the DOJ's website. So this is covering a gap. While the licensed gun owners are required to, with the purchase, to have these, they're not required to keep them and actually use them. Other gaps that this covers is for vehicles, the penal code only allows handguns, requires handguns to be locked or stored. So under our ordinance, this includes long arms like shotguns, rifles. There also is a gap in the penal code where, like Brian said, it's under a negligence standard for criminal possession and storage. Here it is clearly if the gun is either locked or not locked, then you won't be in violation of the ordinance. And the penal code doesn't include firearm precursors, which we define here as in the penal code's definition of precursors. So this also requires them to be stored as well. So happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. So I will ask if there's anybody on the council who has a question regarding this issue. Councilmember McDonald.
Thanks. A couple of easy ones, I hope. Are we looping? I appreciate what you're doing with the schools and coordinating with schools. Are we looping WA and Adobe in the conversations? Informationally.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we are through a variety of different projects discussing both school safety plans, emergency planning, and situations like this. We're engaging and will continue to engage with all of our local schools. We commonly encounter that residents are attending schools both in and outside of the city limits and vice versa. So we have that relationship in place already and are already in progress or process with a variety of other projects with those specific schools and could easily incorporate them in this.
Great. Thank you. The other thing we're thinking about is this really addresses a certain class of problem, accidentals in the homes, and I love what we've done with having an annual turn-in program. So my question is the turn-in program intended to be annual? Is that going to be regularly available program.
I think we would
The
welcome.
buyback, I think we're calling it, yeah.
Yeah, I think we would welcome that. We were proud to lead the way for the county and be the first city in Sonoma County to host one of those events. I think our staff is committed to it. We saw a broad range of community support and engagement through that event. And I really think that just supplements and augments programs like this. If there's individuals that no longer have a need for or have an unwanted firearm in their home, we'd welcome the opportunity, whether through a gun buyback event that we could easily host annually, or at any time if they were to come into the police department, they can turn that in and we'll process that. And that goes in line with these reporting requirements that we're looking to reduce the timeline for reporting. So reducing opportunities for access to firearms in the home, increasing the safety and security of those when they're not in use. Those are all things that we look forward and think add value and benefit to the community.
Great, thanks.
Vice Mayor Posake.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. You mentioned being in conversation with the gun sellers, as this gets moved forward. I wonder if you can say how many gun sellers we have in town. I haven't seen that number. Can you?
I would have to check and inquire, but we regularly work with our local gun dealers and Department of Justice. It's not uncommon for individuals through their normal registration process. If there's an issue that comes up with that, we contact our gun dealers and follow up with them. So we have longstanding relationships there. We have a few handful of gun dealers. My interactions with them here locally have also been positive, where I think they also recognize the value of having responsible gun owners that recognize the importance of properly securing their firearms. As Dylan mentioned, there's a variety of safety tips and commonly accepted devices and tools and storage options out there that are commonly recommended even at point of sale and available in our gun dealers here locally. And I think that they would welcome and encourage and support us and look for opportunities to increase the safety and security of their users.
Not seeing any other questions on the dais, I will ask our city clerk if she's received any public comment on this item.
Yes, Madam Mayor, we received 3 public comments prior to the meeting, which are posted online with the agenda packet.
Thank you. I have one speaker card on this item for people who are here at the City Hall. And we will check with people online to see if there's any people online. But I will start with the person. Do you want to make that announcement now?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay.
At this time, if there's anyone in the public that would like to speak this item, please raise your virtual hand or hit *9. And Madam Mayor, at this point, I do not have anyone.
Okay, thank you. And so the first and only speaker so far is Stefan Perez.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Petaluma City Council. It's me, your boy, Stefan Perez, Chairman of the California Rifle and Pistol Association Sonoma County chapter. Thank you to the council members and staff that responded to my emails about item 14 during this hectic time of year. Tonight, I'm here on behalf of our chapter members, many of which live in the city of Petaluma, myself included, to oppose the introduced ordinance that seeks to implement firearm-related restrictions on residents and visitors to the city of Petaluma. CRPA and its members advocate for responsible gun ownership and not permitting prohibited persons access to firearms. But the government does not have the authority to infringe on the right to self-defense by dictating that to what a person does in the home. California state laws already create liability for the criminal storage of a firearm for any gun owner that allows a minor or prohibited person to access and misuse a firearm. The state's firearm storage regulation is comprehensive, full already. So local ordinances imposing further criminal penalties on the storage of firearms are preempted. We already have laws in the books for this type of stuff. So the proposal is unenforceable under the Fourth Amendment. The city will not be able to enforce proposed ordinance requirements because the Fourth Amendment prohibits an inspection unless probable cause is established. So cops just can't go into your house. The city attorney must acknowledge that enforcing the ordinance is impossible, as had Councilman King acknowledged this when it was initially brought up months ago. The proposal infringes on Second Amendment rights. An issue in Heller versus District of Columbia was an ordinance substantially similar to proposed ordinance. The Supreme Court held that any ban, quote, any ban on handgun possession in the home violates the Second Amendment, as does a prohibition against rendering any lawful firearm in the home inoperable for the purposes of immediate self-defense. So while Heller did not answer every conceivable question about the Second Amendment, it was very clear that, quote, law-abiding individuals are entitled to keep handguns in their homes that are both operable and immediately accessible to self-defense. Okay. So this proposed ordinance is in direct contradiction to the rights espoused in Heller. It seems to be a little vague in some parts, and another unenforceable law meant for political pandering, it feels like. So I hope the city takes a good look at this ordinance before making any decisions. Thank you and Merry Christmas.
Thank you. That's our only speaker unless someone has joined the Zoom at Zoom.
Madam Mayor, there still does not appear to be a speaker.
Okay, so with that, I will close public comment on this item and take it back to the council for discussion and action. Councilmember King.
Thank you. I just would like to clarify something. I have no recollection of ever indicating that this was potentially unenforceable. And in fact, my view is that the Second Amendment does not prohibit gun regulations if it's properly read. So I'm not sure what I said or when I said it, but I certainly and sure as hell didn't say that a gun regulation of this nature is unenforceable. And I will tell you, I'm in support of it 100%.
Councilmember Healy.
Thank you. I just had one question for Mr. Brady. Was the Morgan Hill decision more recent than the Heller decision that was just raised?
That is correct. It was within the last few months.
And how did the Morgan Hill decision harmonize that?
So it recognized, well, this did not render guns inoperable. There's still an exception under our ordinance that if it's on your person or immediately accessible, then you don't violate this ordinance. They also recognized, as in the Jackson, which was the San Francisco case that was upheld by the Ninth Circuit, they discussed the important Second Amendment interests, as well as the police interests here to provide safety for the residents as well as the community. So they upheld a similar ordinance. And then I would just add too, that there's a recent Senate bill in California that goes into effect in January that says unless a bill is expressly preempted regarding gun controls, there is no more implied preemption. So unless, again, a city ordinance is expressly preempted by the state law, it will be upheld.
Okay, I appreciate that. And if there's nothing else, I'll move approval.
Okay, 1 minute, 1 second. Our city attorney wanted to speak.
Thank you. Everything Dylan said was correct. And I just would like to add a couple additional things to refute Mr. Perez's comments. So the Heller case preceded the San Francisco case. The San Francisco case upheld before the Ninth Circuit San Francisco's similar ordinance under Heller and focused. It was purely a Second Amendment analysis that they conducted. The Morgan Hill case that upheld the Morgan Hills safe storage regulation and 48-hour notice requirement, which we've included in our ordinance, really focused on state law preemption with reference to the Second Amendment. And we quoted in the staff report the holding in that case that under California law, and of course subject to the Second Amendment as construed in Heller, local agencies and cities are permitted to regulate more strictly than the state law does, which our ordinance would do, but again, subject to the U.S. Constitution. It's not an unenforceable ordinance. Petaluma police are busy providing public safety services. They're not going to be knocking on doors to ask about people's weapons, and they would need consent to be able to come in. But where I see this besides its deterring effect and its informational effect, where I see it coming into play most likely is going to be in those incidents to which our police department members respond to calls regarding domestic violence or welfare checks under the Welfare and Institutions Code, where they don't only have the right, but also the duty to make a determination in those instances if firearms are present and they're a danger, to take them into custody. And those laws have been upheld under the US Constitution. And those will be the instances when it will be clear, I think, to the officers whether there may be, in addition to what other safety threats are happening, violations under the ordinance should the council adopt it. And Ryan, I don't know if you want to elaborate on that, but
Also lawful vehicle stops too is a good opportunity, I think, to enforce this ordinance here.
Yeah, I would echo both of those. I mean, for context, since January 1 of 2020 to basically last week, we've collected and taken into evidence over 315 firearms. We're encountering them quite regularly with growing frequency. And like City Attorney Danley mentioned, you know, it's a pretty unnerving experience to be in a domestic family dispute situation where there's a firearm present but not involved. It's accessible, it's potentially loaded, it's in a home, and there's not been a criminal act. And we historically have done our best to mitigate and reduce the tensions in that household or separate parties, or now with the implementation of other programs like SAFE. But at times we've had to leave the home unresolved. And, you know, that is incredibly unnerving. It's incredibly unsafe. And I wouldn't welcome that type of situation to occur for anyone in this community. And so we look forward to hopefully putting our staff into safer situations where if they encounter that when they enter a home, there's something that is enforceable and that is actionable, or hopefully through the efforts of this, that they don't encounter those situations and we don't find community members left in those predicaments.
And then I'll just add to staff, we don't feel this as just a symbolic ordinance. If it was, the Gifford Law Center wouldn't have recommended it. 21 other cities wouldn't have recommended it, including San Francisco, San Jose, Oakland, San Diego County, so some of the bigger jurisdictions out there. And we do feel it would add a benefit to the community. And that's why we brought it before you.
Thank you. And I have two more, Council Member Barnacle and the Vice Mayor.
Thank you. I will second the motion that's on the floor. My two comments are, I think the video on proper usage is a good idea. The more that we can have our police officers talking about safe storage and safe handling and things like that, I think it's good. You're the right messenger for this. And then secondarily, the free trigger lock program that you mentioned, I would like to see in the next community update that if we're going to talk about this, that we also promote the free trigger lock program, because that's news to me, and it's a pretty easy thing that people can avail themselves of. So thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Oh, okay. All right. So we have a motion by Healy, a second by Barnacle. And if there's no more discussion, we will have a roll call vote.
Barrett,
Yes.
Barnacle,
Yes.
Fisher,
Yes.
Healy,
Yes.
King,
yes,
McDonald,
Yes.
Kosike.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. And thank you to staff for this work. We appreciate it.